It started, as so many nightmares do, with love. Her name was Brooke. When I met her, she was a whirlwind of brilliance and vulnerability, a successful financial consultant who seemed to have this one dark shadow clinging to her past, a monster of an ex-husband. For the first few months of our relationship, he was just a ghost, a name she'd whisper with a shudder. Then we got married, and the ghost decided to materialize. She told me he was obsessive, that he couldn't let go. The classic terrifying story of a stalker. And I, being the man who loved her, the man who wanted to be her shield, believed every single word. I became her protector. It was a role I took on with a fierce, almost primal sense of duty. My entire world narrowed to a single focus, keeping Brooke safe. I turned our home into a fortress. We lived in a beautiful two-story Craftsman in a quiet, tree-lined suburb of Denver, a place that should have felt like a sanctuary. Instead, I wired it like a military compound. High-definition cameras on every corner, motion-activated floodlights that would sear the retinas of any nocturnal creature, and a security system with more sensors than a NASA launch pad. I spent weekends on a ladder, running cables through the attic, my knuckles raw and my back aching, but every bead of sweat felt like a brick in the wall I was building around her. Brooke would watch me from the patio, her eyes wide and filled with what I thought was grateful tears. She'd bring me lemonade and touch my arm, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Will," she'd say, her voice a fragile whisper, and my heart would swell with a kind of noble purpose. I was her knight. The incidents were sporadic at first, designed to feel like a slow, creeping dread. A notification on our phones in the middle of the night, motion detected at the end of the driveway. I'd leap out of bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, and we'd watch the grainy footage of a dark sedan idling for a moment, before slowly driving off. Then there were the emails. She'd show them to me, her face pale. They were from anonymous accounts, filled with vague but menacing threats, talking about watching her, knowing her routine. I helped her set up new email addresses, scrubbed her social media, changed all her passwords. I felt like I was fighting a phantom, a digital ghost that haunted our lives. The restraining orders were my idea. I marched down to the courthouse with a thick folder of evidence, printouts of the emails, logs from the security cameras, a timeline of the harassment that Brooke and I had meticulously constructed together. I sat with her as she gave her statement to the police, my hand a steady presence on her back as she recounted the story of her violent, abusive marriage. A story I now know was a masterfully crafted piece of fiction. The first restraining order was granted, when he inevitably violated it by driving down our public street. I was the one who called the police, my voice tight with righteous fury. I was the one who filed the second, more severe order. I was her weapon, and I was proud to be wielded. Yesterday was the breaking point. It was a clear, cold afternoon. I was in my home office trying to focus on a design schematic for a new commercial building I was architecting, but the familiar anxiety was a low hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. A notification chimed on my phone. Motion detected. Front street camera. I pulled up the feed, and my blood ran cold. It was him. The same dark sedan. It wasn't just idling this time, it was parked. 2 houses down, partially obscured by a large oak tree, but unmistakably there. An open book lay on the passenger seat, but I just knew, he was watching the house. A rage I hadn't felt before boiled up inside me. This wasn't just a violation of a piece of paper from a judge. This was a violation of my home, my life, my wife's sanity. I had done everything by the book. I had trusted the system, and here he was, brazenly daring me. I snapped. I didn't think. I just moved. I stormed out of my office, grabbed my car keys from the bowl by the door, and didn't even bother putting on a jacket. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I barely felt it. All I could see was that car. I was going to end this, right here, right now. I wasn't going to be the man who hid behind cameras and phone calls anymore. I was going to be the man who stood on his own 2 feet and faced the monster at his gate. My heart was a drum solo in my ears as I strode down the sidewalk, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I was rehearsing a speech in my head, a torrent of threats and warnings. As I got closer, I could see the man in the driver's seat more clearly. He wasn't the hulking brute Brooke had described. He was just a man. He looked tired, wearing a simple gray suit, his tie loosened. He was looking down at something in his lap, not at my house. My pace slowed slightly, a flicker of confusion cutting through my rage. I reached the driver's side window and rapped on it, hard, with my knuckles. "Get out of the car," I snarled, my voice sounding more feral than I intended. The man looked up, and there was no fear in his eyes, just a weary sort of surprise. He didn't look like a cornered animal. He looked like an accountant who'd been interrupted during his lunch break. He slowly, deliberately, put down the file he was reading and pressed the button to lower the window. The quiet hum of the electric motor was the only sound for a moment. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm and even. "You know exactly why I'm here." I seethed. "You've been terrorizing my wife. For a year. The restraining orders, the emails, all of it. It's over. You're going to leave. And you're never coming back, or I swear to God." He held up a hand, not in a defensive way, but in a way that commanded me to stop. It was a gesture of authority, not fear. He reached into his jacket, and for a terrifying split second, I thought he was going for a weapon. I flinched, bracing myself. But he didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a small leather wallet. He flipped it open, and the sun glinted off a small gold shield. "Special Agent Marcus," he said, his voice still maddeningly calm. "FBI. White Collar Crime Division, and your will, I presume." My tirade died in my throat. The words I had prepared, the anger, the righteous fury, it all evaporated, leaving a cold, hollow void. FBI? White collar crime? It didn't make any sense. "Your wife Brooke," he continued, his eyes locking onto mine, "isn't my victim. She's my primary target in a multi-million-dollar investment fraud investigation." He let the words hang in the cold air between us. Each one was a hammer blow, shattering the reality I had so carefully constructed. The cameras, the security system, the restraining orders, the late-night whispers, the fear. It was all a lie. A stage, and I wasn't the knight. I was the stagehand, the dupe, the fool who had spent the last year not protecting his wife from a stalker, but helping a criminal hide from the law. I had been her shield, all right. A human shield. And I had just spent a year, my money and my soul obstructing a federal investigation. My legs felt weak. I looked from the badge back to his impassive face, and the world tilted on its axis. He wasn't the monster. The monster was sleeping in my bed. The drive home was 500 yards of pure, unadulterated shock. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, my vision tunneling. The familiar, comforting sight of my own house, the one I'd turned into a digital fortress, now looked like a stranger's home. It felt alien, tainted. Every window was an eye, every camera a testament to my own monumental stupidity. I parked in the driveway, and just sat there for a full 10 minutes, the engine off, the silence screaming in my ears. Agent Marcus's words echoed and re-echoed in my head. Primary target. Multi-million-dollar fraud investigation. Obstruction of justice. Obstruction. A federal crime. A crime I had committed with love in my heart and a profound sense of righteousness. I finally managed to get out of the car, my body feeling like it was filled with lead. I walked into the house, and the smell of roasting chicken hit me. Brooke was in the kitchen, humming along to some indie rock station, pulling a roasting pan out of the oven. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts and a pair of yoga pants, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked so normal, so domestic, so innocent. The dissonance was so jarring, it made me physically nauseous. "Hey honey," she chirped, turning to me with a bright smile. Perfect timing. "Dinner's almost ready." Her smile faltered as she saw my face. "Will, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Was it him? Did you see him again? I just stared at her. I saw her face, the concerned frown, the wide, searching eyes, but it was like looking at a photograph of someone I used to know. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger wearing her skin. Who was she? What was any of this? I confronted him. I said, my voice flat, hollow. Her expression immediately shifted to one of alarm. She dropped the oven mitts on the counter and rushed over to me, her hands fluttering over my chest. my arms, checking for injuries. What? Will, you shouldn't have. He's dangerous. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? And there it was. The performance. The well-rehearsed act of the terrified victim. A year ago, I would have wrapped my arms around her, held her tight, and whispered that everything was going to be okay. Now her touch felt like ice. I stepped back, and a flicker of confusion, real confusion, crossed her face. He's not a stalker, Brooke, I said. The air in the kitchen turned thick and cold. Her hands dropped to her sides. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice losing its frantic edge, replaced by a guarded stillness. His name is Marcus, I continued, watching her, really watching her, for the first time. He's an FBI agent. He's investigating you for fraud. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Every ounce of color drained from her face. The concerned wife, the terrified victim. It all just melted away, leaving behind a hard, calculating stranger. Her eyes, which I had once thought were so full of love and warmth, turned to flint. She didn't deny it. No gasp of disbelief, no tearful protestation of her innocence. Just a chilling, dead calm. That was the moment my heart didn't just break, it atomized. It wasn't about the lie, not really. It was about the realization that the entire foundation of my life, the woman I had built my world around, was made of smoke. You spoke to him, she said. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. I did, I replied. She walked past me, her movements stiff and controlled, and went to the living room window, peering through the blinds down the street. She was looking for his car. She was assessing the threat. The gears were turning. I could almost hear them click. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was a cornered animal, and I was the one who had just kicked open the door to her trap. That night was the longest of my life. She tried to spin it, of course. She came to me later, her face streaked with tears that I now recognized as a strategic tool. She claimed Marcus was the stalker, that he was obsessed with her from a case years ago and was using his position to harass her, to frame her. She tried to weave this new, more elaborate lie, but the spell was broken. I saw the strings. I saw the puppeteer. I just nodded along, a hollow man in a hollow house, and said I needed time to think. She seemed to take that as a victory, a sign that her manipulation still had its hold on me. She went to bed, probably believing she had averted the immediate crisis. I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, the same office where I had planned our defense against a phantom menace, and I let the memories flood in. It was like watching a movie of my life, but this time I had the director's commentary. Every memory was recontextualized, tainted by the truth. I remembered the day, 6 months ago, she came to me in a panic. He did it, Will. I think he hacked my work laptop, she'd cried. She claimed her ex, a supposed tech genius, had breached her computer to steal her client information and ruin her career. She was frantic. I, the ever-helpful protector, spent an entire weekend with her, securing her digital life. She directed me. We need to wipe the hard drive completely, Will. It's the only way to be sure he's gone. I did it. I used a military-grade data destruction program to perform a multi-pass wipe on her primary laptop. I wasn't just deleting files. I was meticulously destroying federal evidence. Then there was the matter of her finances. He's trying to drain my accounts, she'd told me, showing me a faked bank alert. We need to move my money, hide it somewhere he can't find it. Over the next few weeks, I helped her. I sat with her at the dining room table as she opened new accounts with smaller, obscure online banks. I helped her transfer large sums of money into a series of newly created LLCs, entities she told me were for asset protection. I thought I was helping her build a financial firewall against a vindictive ex-husband. In reality, I was an active, willing participant in a sophisticated money laundering scheme. I had used my own knowledge of business structures to help her create the very shell companies the FBI was now investigating. The flashbacks kept coming, each one another twist of the knife. The time I drove her to a storage unit an hour out of town to store old family heirlooms. She was afraid her ex would try to steal or destroy. What was in those boxes? Ledgers? Burner phones? Cash? The time she asked me to install a new, more complex firewall on our home network, giving me a list of specific IP ranges to block. I thought I was blocking her stalker. I was probably blocking FBI servers. I felt like a fool. A colossal, idiotic fool. But beneath the shame, a new feeling was beginning to smolder. It started as a cold knot of dread in my stomach, and slowly, over the course of that long, dark night, it began to burn. It was rage. A pure, clean, undiluted rage. She hadn't just lied to me. She hadn't just used me. She had taken my love, my loyalty, my desire to protect, and she had twisted it into a weapon for her own criminal enterprise. She had made me a co-conspirator. She had put my entire life, my career, my freedom on the line without a moment's hesitation. The catalyst, the moment my despair finally hardened into cold, diamond-hard resolve, came around 3 a.m. I was rummaging through the filing cabinet in my office, looking for, I don't even know what, a piece of the truth, maybe. My hand brushed against a thick manila folder labeled Brooke Mater, the restraining order. I pulled it out and spread the documents on my desk. There it was, in my own handwriting on the application form, a summary of the events I had helped her fabricate. The timeline of harassment, the list of threatening emails. It was a monument to my own gullibility. I stared at my own signature on the bottom of a sworn affidavit, attesting to the truth of these lies under penalty of perjury. And that's when the rage found its focus. It wasn't about my broken heart anymore. It wasn't about the humiliation. This was about survival. She had tied me to her crimes. If she went down, she would take me with her. She would paint me as a willing partner, the architect of her schemes. My fingerprints were everywhere. I had to get ahead of it. I had to untangle myself from her web before it strangled me. The sun was just beginning to cast a gray light into the sky. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor of my computer. The tired, defeated man who had sat down in this chair hours ago was gone. In his place was someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Someone cold, focused, and utterly resolute. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my life from the woman who had stolen it. And I realized, with a clarity that was almost terrifying, that I was the only person who knew where all the bodies were buried. Because I was the one who had helped her dig the graves. The game had changed. She thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She was about to find out she was playing with a king who was ready to flip the whole board over. The first call I made wasn't to the FBI. It was to Leo. Leo wasn't just my best friend since college. He was a shark. One of the most ruthless and effective divorce attorneys in Denver. If Brooke had weaponized love, Leo had made a career out of dismantling those weapons for a living. I met him at a greasy spoon diner, halfway between our houses at 6 in the morning. The place smelled of stale coffee and bacon, a scent so normal it felt like it belonged to another lifetime. I laid it all out for him. The stalker, the cameras, the confrontation, Agent Marcus, the badge, the fraud investigation. I watched his face as I spoke, saw him transition from concerned friend to calculating lawyer. He listened intently, his coffee growing cold, not interrupting once until I got to the part about helping her wipe the hard drives and set up the LLCs. He finally held up a hand. "We'll stop. Don't say another word about what you did," he said, his voice low and serious. "From this moment on, you were a concerned husband acting under duress and manipulation. You were a victim of co-conspiracy fraud. Got it?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Okay," he said, leaning forward. "This is bad. Like life-ruiningly bad. You're an accomplice. Your digital and financial fingerprints are all over this. The restraining orders you filed give her a documented history of persecution that she can use to paint Marcus as a rogue agent and you as a paranoid, controlling husband who snapped and turned on her when you found out the feds were sniffing around." My stomach lurched. "So what do? I go to Marcus? I tell him everything?" "Not yet," Leo said, his eyes narrowed in thought. "You go to him now. You're a panicked accomplice trying to cut a deal. You're worthless to them without leverage. You need to walk in there not as a suspect, but as their star witness. You need to bring them something they don't have, something irrefutable. You need to give them Brooke on a silver platter, gift-wrapped, with a confession tied around her neck." "But she wiped everything, Leo." "I helped her do it," I said, the frustration boiling over. "The laptop is a brick. The paper files are probably ashes. What could I possibly have?" Leo took a slow sip of his cold coffee, his gaze distant. Think, Will. Think like an architect. You're meticulous. You're a planner. You back everything up. There has to be something she overlooked. Something you did, a habit of yours, that she didn't account for. What did she miss? I sat there racking my brain, replaying the entire year. The firewalls, the encrypted drives, the cloud storage accounts I'd set up for her. She was smart. She knew tech. She had directed my every move. It all felt like a hopeless, tangled knot. And then a memory surfaced. It was small, insignificant, from almost a year ago, right after we moved into the house. The server, I whispered. Leo's eyes snapped into focus. What server? My home media server. Before all this started, I was a nerd. I had this project. I wanted to digitize all our old media. DVDs, home movies, photos. I bought a massive network-attached storage device, a NAS, and set it up in the basement closet. To test it, I set it to run a full, automatic system-level backup of every device on the network. Our phones, our laptops, everything. It was supposed to run once a week. Leo leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. Did you ever turn it off? My mind raced. I had set it up, got it running, and then the stalker drama began. My life became a frantic mess of security cameras and legal documents. The server project was forgotten, left to hum away in a dark closet, a forgotten relic of a happier time. No, I said, a slow dawning realization spreading through me. I never turned it off. I completely forgot about it. And Brooke? Leo asked. Does she know about it? No, I said, my heart starting to pound. She thought it was just a bunch of old hard drives for a project I'd abandoned. She never went in that closet. Leo sat back in the booth, a slow predatory smile spreading across his face. Will, my friend, he said, you didn't just help her dig the graves. You filmed the whole thing in high definition with pristine audio. We have it all. The original, unaltered files. The emails she claimed were from her ex. The real financial statements before she doctored them. Her browser history. Everything. She didn't miss a wire. She missed the entire power station. His enthusiasm was infectious, but a cold dread still gripped me. What if she finds it? What if she remembers, and just smashes it? Then you have to get it out of there, he said. Tonight. And you have to play the part of your life. You are the loving, confused, supportive husband. You believe her story about Marcus being a rogue agent. You are on her side. You need to make her feel safe. You need to make her feel like she's still in control. Because the moment she senses you've pulled away, she'll start hiding what's left. And she will burn you to the ground to create a diversion. He then brought up his own life, a small subplot to my grand drama. He was in the middle of a nasty case for a client, a woman whose husband, a pediatric dentist, had been siphoning money from his practice into a secret account for years to fund a gambling addiction. The guy is a pillar of the community, Leo said, shaking his head. Cries in front of the judge about how his wife's outrageous accusations are destroying his reputation. But we found the account. It's always the little thing they forget. For him it was the rewards program on his credit card. He remembered to hide the statements, but he forgot the points summary they mailed to his office. 100,000 points for a Vegas casino resort. That's our linchpin. His story clarified my mission. I needed to find my Vegas casino resort. My secret plan began to form, a complex blueprint of deception and misdirection. The first step was to secure the evidence. That night I waited until Brooke was asleep. Her breathing was deep and even, the picture of peaceful slumber. I slipped out of bed and crept down to the basement, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. The closet was cool and smelled of dust and electronics. And there it was, in the corner, a black box with a single, softly pulsing blue light. The NAS, my forgotten project. My arc. Disconnecting it was nerve-wracking. Every click of a cable being unplugged sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. I wrapped the device in an old blanket, carried it out to my car like a stolen baby, and drove it to a 24-hour climate-controlled storage unit I had rented that afternoon under a false name paid for in cash. It was the same tactic she had used, and the irony was not lost on me. The next morning, I initiated Phase 2, the performance. I woke up before her and made coffee. When she came into the kitchen, her face still puffy from sleep, her eyes wary, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I held her. I told her I was sorry for doubting her, that I was just scared and confused. You were right, I said, my voice thick with fake emotion. This Marcus guy, he's unhinged. We can't trust him. We can't trust the police. We have to handle this ourselves. I saw the tension in her shoulders release. She sagged against me, a wave of relief washing over her. She thought she had me back. She thought her puppet was back on his strings. Oh Will, she whispered into my chest. I was so scared, I thought I'd lost you. Never, I said, stroking her hair while my stomach churned. We're in this together. Always. Over the next few weeks I became the most devoted, paranoid, and proactive husband imaginable. My life became a lie. We spent hours wargaming scenarios. What if Marcus came to the house with a warrant? Where would we hide the sensitive documents she still had? I helped her buy a new state-of-the-art paper shredder. I watched as she fed stacks of documents into it, turning potential evidence into confetti, all while I feigned anxiety. She had no idea the originals of everything she was destroying were already safe, cataloged, and waiting. My hidden leverage wasn't just the server. It was my knowledge of her. I knew how she thought. I knew her tells. I knew that her arrogance was her greatest weakness. She believed she was smarter than everyone in the room, especially me, and I leaned into that. I played the part of the slightly dim, emotionally driven husband who was good with his hands but not with complex strategy. I'd ask dumb questions. So the LLCs, that's like a super secret bank account, right? She would sigh, a little condescendingly, and explain the intricacies of corporate veils, never once suspecting that I was taking mental notes, cross-referencing her explanations with the raw data I was secretly reviewing every night in my new sterile storage unit. Leo and I had turned the 10x10 unit into a makeshift war room. I bought a new laptop, one that never connected to any public Wi-Fi, and a generator. Night after night, I sat on a cheap plastic stool under the bare bulb of the storage unit, sifting through a digital mirror of my wife's entire life. It was all there. The incriminating emails to her co-conspirators. The real, undoctored financial records showing the millions she had diverted from her clients' investment funds. Spreadsheets detailing the network of shell corporations. Voicemails. Text messages. It was a mountain of evidence so vast, so damning, it was breathtaking. We found her Achilles heel. One of her biggest victims was a charitable foundation for retired teachers, a fund she had systematically drained of nearly $3 million. But her contact there wasn't the fund manager. It was a junior administrator, a sweet, grandmotherly woman named Carol, who Brooke had completely charmed. In the emails, Brooke was condescending, calling her dear Carol and sweetie, all while giving her instructions that would ultimately lead to the fund's ruin. Carol was the perfect unwitting accomplice, and I knew Brooke had underestimated her. This was my plan. I wouldn't go to the FBI as a man trying to save his own skin. I would go to them as the man who had single-handedly cracked the case. I would deliver them, not just the evidence but a fully formed narrative, complete with a key witness they didn't even know they had. Brooke thought her fortress was impenetrable. She had no idea I was about to hand the FBI the master key, the blueprints, and the demolition codes. It was no longer just about survival. A new, colder emotion was taking root. It was about seeing her face when she realized that the pawn she had so carelessly sacrificed was the one to declare checkmate. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. The first move had to be silent, almost invisible. A tremor in the web, not a hammer blow. My goal wasn't to expose her immediately, but to introduce chaos into her carefully controlled system, to make her look over her shoulder and wonder if the ghost she'd invented was starting to feel real. My chance came disguised as marital concern. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, a charade of domestic bliss that was becoming more nauseating by the day, I brought up our finances. I played the part of the worried husband, spooked by the rogue FBI agent. Brooke, honey, I started, drying a plate with meticulous care. I've been thinking about this whole Marcus situation. What if he tries to freeze our assets? You know, as part of his investigation, my name is on our main checking account. My architectural firm's income goes in there. He could cripple my business just to get to you. I saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes. I had planted the seed. She had insulated her stolen money, but she hadn't considered the tactical vulnerability of our shared, legitimate life. My income was the clean water that made her dirty money look drinkable. You're right, she said, her tone suddenly serious. She put down the sponge and dried her hands, her mind clearly racing. We need to protect you. We need to protect your business. I was thinking, I said, trying to sound hesitant, like the idea was just occurring to me. Maybe I should open a new separate business account at a different bank, just for my firm's income. A clean break. That way if he comes after our joint accounts, my livelihood is safe. We can still pay the bills from my personal savings for a while. It was the perfect bait. It appealed to her sense of strategic superiority and her need to compartmentalize. She saw it as me protecting myself, which in her mind was a logical step that also conveniently isolated my legitimate finances from hers, making her own illicit pools of money less conspicuous. That's a brilliant idea, Will, she said, cupping my face in her hands. You see, we're smarter than him. We just have to be one step ahead. The next day I didn't just open a new business account, I systematically began redirecting every cent of my income, every client payment, every automatic deposit into this new fortified financial bunker that she knew nothing about. I left just enough in our old joint account to cover the mortgage and utilities for the next month, creating a buffer. To her everything on the surface looked normal, but I had just quietly pulled the plug. The well was about to run dry. The second move was more subtle. It targeted her network. From the server backups I had a complete list of her victims, the people whose life savings she was managing. But I also had a list of her co-conspirators, the two other junior partners at her old firm who had helped her execute the scheme. One of them, a slick young guy named Gavin, was clearly the weak link. His emails to Brooke were nervous, full of anxiety about exposure. I needed a way to spook him, to make him think the ship was taking on water. I created a new anonymous email address. The name I chose was a deep cut, a piece of information only someone on the inside would know, the name of a defunct shell corporation she had used in a previous smaller fraud years ago, something I'd found buried deep in the server's data. To an outsider, the email address, orionstarholdings@protonmail.com, would mean nothing. To Gavin, it would be a ghost from the past. The email I sent was simple, just a single line of text sent to his personal address. The Chandler Foundation knows. Are you ready? The Chandler Foundation was a small family-run charity they had defrauded early on. It wasn't the big one, the teacher's fund, but it was a loose end. I had no idea if they knew anything, but it didn't matter. The goal was to inject fear. I had also, through my meticulous preparation, gained access to our home router's administrative panel. Brooke, in her arrogance, had used a simple password, the name of her childhood pet. From there I could monitor network traffic. 3 hours after I sent the email, I saw what I was hoping for, a flurry of encrypted activity between Gavin's known IP address and Brooke's devices. Phone calls, frantic text messages. I couldn't see the content, but I could see the panic. That night, Brooke was a wreck. She was jumpy, constantly checking her phone. She tried to hide it, but the mask was slipping. Is everything okay? I asked, feigning concern as I brought her a glass of wine. It's just work, she said, waving a dismissive hand. Gavin is being an idiot. Panicking over nothing. What's he panicking about? I asked, my voice laced with innocence. She shot me a sharp look. It's just old client stuff. You wouldn't understand. Okay, I said, backing off. Just know I'm here for you. The first sign of real panic from her came about 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my office, and I heard a strangled cry from the kitchen. I rushed in to find her staring at her laptop, her face ashen. What is it? I asked. The transfer, she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. It was rejected. I looked at the screen. It was an alert from one of her offshore banks. A large wire transfer. Several $100,000 had been flagged and blocked. She was trying to move money from one of her shell LLCs to an even deeper, more anonymous account in the Cayman Islands. What do you mean? Rejected. I said, feigning confusion. Is it because of Marcus? Did he do this? He can't have, she muttered, more to herself than to me. He can't know about this account. No one knows about this account. But I knew. And I had given the account number to Leo, who had a friend who worked in financial compliance. Leo had assured me that a concerned citizens could file an anonymous tip about potential money laundering activity associated with a specific account. The tip wouldn't be enough for a warrant, but it would be more than enough to trigger a bank's internal security protocols and freeze any large outgoing international transfers pending a review. It was bureaucratic sand in the gears of her machine. It must be him, she shrieked, her voice rising with hysteria. He's everywhere. He's trying to ruin me. He's trying to trap me. She slammed her laptop shut and began pacing the kitchen like a caged tiger. This was a new level of panic. Before, she had been a calm, calculating strategist. Now, for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Her system, which she believed to be flawless and entirely under her control, was beginning to fail in ways she couldn't explain. The silent takeover was working. She thought her fortress was being besieged from the outside by a phantom army. She had no idea the saboteur was standing right next to her, offering her a comforting hand on her shoulder while secretly taking a sledgehammer to the foundations. The cracks were starting to show, and her panic was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. The power shift didn't happen with a bang. It was a slow, creeping erosion of her authority, a dismantling of the support structure she thought was immutable. My quiet campaign of chaos was paying off, and the family she had built, her network of co-conspirators and victims, was beginning to crumble. The family exodus, for me, began with Carol, the sweet, grandmotherly administrator from the Retired Teachers Foundation. I had spent weeks poring over the emails between her and Brooke, and I knew Carol wasn't a criminal, she was a casualty. Brooke had used her trust and her lack of financial sophistication to get her to authorize the transfers. The key was a series of documents Brooke had forged, making it look like the transfers were for low-risk, high-yield bond purchases. I had to reach her, but I couldn't do it directly. That would tip off Brooke, so I used an intermediary. Leo's firm occasionally employed a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Frank. I hired Frank for a single task. I gave him a sealed manila envelope and an address. Inside the envelope was a single, printed page, an anonymous letter. It contained no threats, no accusations. It just contained 2 columns of information. On the left was the list of bond purchases Carol thought she was authorizing. On the right was the list of wire transfers to the LLC Shell Corporation in Delaware that actually happened. At the bottom, I wrote a single sentence: ask a forensic accountant to compare the Foundation's annual statements to the official bank withdrawal records. Do not talk to Brooke Davies. 2 weeks later, the earthquake hit. I was at my desk when my phone buzzed with a text from Leo. It was a link to a press release from the Denver District Attorney's Office. The Teachers' Benevolent Fund had been placed under emergency receivership pending an investigation into significant financial irregularities. I walked into the living room, where Brooke was on the phone. Her back was to me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Her voice was sharp, cutting. What do you mean you can't get a hold of her? She's a 70-year-old woman, Gavin. Where could she have gone? Just find her. She slammed the phone down and spun around, her face a mask of fury. She saw me standing in the doorway, and her expression morphed into one of practiced distress. It's Carol, she said, her voice catching. The woman from the Teachers Fund. She's making some wild accusations. She's gone to the authorities. She thinks money is missing. What? I asked, my face a perfect portrait of shocked disbelief. But you've managed their fund for years. You're the one who saved it after the 2008 crash. Why would she do this? I was quoting her own lies back to her, the stories she had told me about how she'd single-handedly rescued that fund. It's Marcus, she spat, her eyes wild. He must have gotten to her. He's poisoning my clients against me. He's trying to frame me by turning my own friends into enemies. She was spiraling, trying to fit this new, impossible event into her established narrative of persecution. But it wasn't fitting. The pieces were all wrong. This wasn't a phantom ex-husband or a rogue agent. This was a direct internal attack from a place she thought was secure. Her desperation led to her first major mistake. She tried to counter-manipulate me in a way that was both pathetic and terrifying. That evening, I came home to find the house in disarray. A lamp was knocked over. A picture frame was shattered on the floor. And Brooke was huddled in a corner of the living room, sobbing. Will, she cried, rushing to me. He was here. He got in. I looked around. There were no signs of forced entry. The security system logs on my phone showed no alerts, no unauthorized access. It was a poorly staged scene, a clumsy piece of theater. What happened? I asked, my voice steady. I don't know. she wailed. I was in the shower, and when I came out the house was like this. He must have found a way to disable the alarm. He's escalating. Will, he's trying to drive me insane. She wanted me to panic. She wanted me to call the police and file another report, to create another layer of evidence for her stalker narrative. But I didn't. I just stood there, looking at the fake disarray, and then I looked at her. Brooke, I said calmly. The system wasn't disabled. I just checked the logs. Its system wasn't disabled. I just checked the logs. No one came in. The sobbing stopped instantly. Her eyes, red from what I now realized were crocodile tears, narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying no one broke in, I repeated, my voice quiet but firm. I'm saying this didn't happen. It was the first time I had directly contradicted her reality. It was a declaration of war. Her face hardened, the mask of the victim falling away completely. So you think I'm lying? She hissed, her voice dripping with venom. After everything I've been through, you're calling me a liar. Maybe you're the one who's on his side. Maybe you've been talking to him. She was lashing out, throwing accusations like grenades, trying to regain control of the narrative. She started accusing me of being paranoid, of being weak, of falling for the FBI's tricks. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, a torrential downpour of manipulation designed to make me doubt my own sanity. But it didn't work. Not anymore. I was inoculated against her poison. I just stood there and took it, my silence a wall she couldn't break through. Her tirade eventually sputtered out, leaving her breathless and shaking in the middle of the living room. The power had shifted. She had always controlled the emotional climate of our home, and for the first time I had refused to participate. I had taken away her power to define reality. She looked at me, not as her loving husband, but as an unknown quantity, a variable she couldn't control. And in her eyes, I saw something I had been waiting a long time to see, genuine fear. Not fear of a stalker, or the FBI, but fear of me. The exodus was complete. She was now truly alone in the fortress we had built, and she was beginning to realize the walls were closing in. The final confrontation wasn't a shouting match in our living room. It wasn't a dramatic, tear-filled confession. It was cold, quiet, and public. It was an execution. After the incident with the faked break-in, our home life became an icy cold war. We were two strangers cohabiting in a house full of secrets. She was watching my every move, and I was letting her. I knew she was planning something, a final move to either flee the country or frame me entirely. I had to act first. I chose the location with surgical precision, a sleek, minimalist coffee shop downtown, the kind with polished concrete floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was neutral territory, bright, open, and filled with people. There would be no room for her histrionics, no opportunity to stage an incident. I texted her that morning. We need to talk. Not at the house. Meet me at the Daily Grind on Larimer at noon. We need a plan. I made it sound like a strategy session, a meeting of co-conspirators. She agreed immediately, likely assuming she could use the meeting to regain control. I got there 20 minutes early and chose a small table in the corner, one with a clear view of the entrance, but that offered a degree of privacy. Leo had delivered a package to me the night before. I opened my briefcase and laid out 3 items on the table. The first was a single glossy photograph. It was a picture I'd taken with my phone of the NAS server, sitting on the metal shelf in the storage unit, its blue light glowing like a malevolent eye. The second was a single sheet of paper, a printout of an email. It was the one I'd found buried in the server's archive. The email where she condescendingly called Carol sweetie, while instructing her to wire $200,000 to the shell company. The third item was my phone, which I placed face up on the table. She walked in exactly at noon, scanning the cafe until she saw me. She had dressed for the part, a sharp, dark business suit, hair pulled back, a look of grim determination on her face. She was here to command her lieutenant, to get her wayward soldier back in line. She sat down opposite me, placing her own expensive leather satchel on the chair beside her. "All right, Will," she began, her voice low and urgent. "Things are getting out of control. The situation with Carol has accelerated things. I've been thinking, and I think the best option is for us to leave the country for a while, just until this blows over. I have a place in Belize." I didn't say a word. I just slid the photograph across the table. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes fixing on the picture. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. What is this, an old computer? You remember my old media server project? I asked. My voice calm, almost conversational. The one I got bored with. Turns out I never turned off the weekly backup function. It made a perfect, bit-for-bit copy of every device on our network for the last 58 weeks. Your laptop, your phone, everything. Before the wipes. Before the shredder. The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted from the photo to my face and back again. The confident, commanding general was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she had been shot. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I slid the second item across the table, the printout of the email, and it captured things like this. The real emails, the real spreadsheets, the real bank statements. It's funny, the things you forget about when you think you're the smartest person in the room. She stared at the email, her hand trembling as she reached for it. She read her own words, the condescending tone, the damning instruction. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a horror that was, for the first time, completely genuine. This wasn't a performance. This was the dawning of her new reality. You, she stammered, her voice a choked whisper. You have it all. I have it all, I confirmed. And for the past 6 weeks, I've been feeding it, piece by piece, to a man I think you know, Agent Marcus. Her composure shattered. It was a stunning thing to witness. The intricate mask of strength and control she had worn for a year just disintegrated, revealing the panicked fraudster beneath. Why, Will? She pleaded, her voice cracking, tears welling in her eyes. But these weren't the calculated tears I was used to. These were the hot, desperate tears of the truly defeated. I did it for us. For our future. There is no us, Brooke, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the concrete floor. There was only you, and your scheme. I was just a tool, a prop you used to hide behind. You didn't just lie to me, you made me a criminal. You wrapped me so tightly in your crimes that you thought I'd have no choice but to go down with you. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense register. But you made the same mistake all brilliant narcissists make. You underestimated the help. You were so focused on the FBI, on the world outside, that you never once thought to check for the enemy sleeping next to you. As I spoke, I saw movement over her shoulder. 2 figures had entered the coffee shop. They were dressed in plain clothes, but they moved with a purpose that cut through the cafe's lazy lunchtime vibe. It was Agent Marcus, and another agent I didn't recognize. They didn't look at me. Their eyes were locked on Brooke. She saw the change in my expression and started to turn. Don't bother, I said softly. They arrived at our table. Marcus looked down at Brooke, his face grim, professional. Brooke Davies, he said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of the entire federal government. You're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering. Her head snapped back to me, her face a maelstrom of shock, betrayal, and pure, undiluted hatred. In that final moment, I saw the real woman I had married. Not the victim, not the brilliant consultant, but the cornered predator. As they gently but firmly pulled her to her feet and placed her hands behind her back, her eyes never left mine. The entire coffee shop was silent, watching the quiet, surreal drama unfold. The click of the handcuffs was the final sound, a definitive metallic punctuation mark at the end of a year-long lie. My old life was over. My new reality had just begun. It's been 6 months since that day in the coffee shop. The legal fallout was messy, but swift. With the mountain of evidence I provided, and my testimony as their star witness, the case against Brooke was airtight. They tried to paint me as a disgruntled spouse, a co-conspirator who turned on her for a better deal. But the server data was impartial. It told a story of a meticulous, long-term deception, with me as the unwitting accomplice. The U.S. Attorney's Office granted me full immunity in exchange for my cooperation. Brooke, Gavin, and her other associate were not so lucky. They took plea deals rather than face a jury. Brooke is now serving a 7-year sentence in a federal correctional facility. The Teachers Fund, thanks to the asset forfeiture, will recover nearly 80 cents on the dollar. It's not whole, but it's a start. Our divorce was finalized while she was awaiting sentencing. I didn't ask for anything except my freedom. I sold the house, that beautiful craftsman that had become a prison of my own making. I couldn't stand to be in it another day. Every room held a ghost, a memory of a life that was a lie. I packed up my personal belongings, put my architectural firm on a temporary, remote-only status, and I just left. I bought a small, unassuming condo downtown, a place with no yard to secure, no extra rooms to haunt. It's sparse, clean and honest. It's mine. For the first few months, the silence was deafening. I was so used to the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, the endless cycle of fear and vigilance. I had to learn how to live without a crisis, without a monster to fight. I had to learn that the monster had been a fabrication, and the fight had been with myself. The truth is, Brooke was a predator, but I had made it easy for her. My desire to be the hero, the protector, the shield, had been a vulnerability she exploited with surgical precision. I wanted so badly to be needed that I never stopped to ask if the damsel was truly in distress. I think about the red flags I ignored, the little inconsistencies that I papered over with the narrative of love. The way she never had any old friends, just new acquaintances. The way her stories about her past were always vague and dramatic. The way she recoiled from any real deep questions about her family or her life before me. I saw what I wanted to see, a wounded soul I could heal. She saw what she needed to see, a willing fool. But here's the thing about being a fool. You can learn. You can grow. You can take the rubble of your old life and use it as the foundation for a new one. I'm starting to do that. I'm taking on smaller architectural projects, things I'm passionate about, not just the big money commercial jobs. I'm reconnecting with old friends like Leo, people who knew me before I became Brooke's protector. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again, to listen to that quiet voice inside that I silenced for so long. It wasn't about revenge in the end. Watching her get arrested, seeing the empire of lies crumble, it didn't bring me joy. It brought me a profound, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of peace. It was the closing of a door, the end of a chapter that nearly cost me everything. My vindication isn't in her punishment, it's in my own survival. It's in the simple act of waking up in my own apartment, making my own coffee, and knowing that the reality I'm living in is my own. It's real. So if you're watching this, and you feel that something is wrong in your own life, if you're making excuses for someone you love, if you're ignoring the red flags because the truth is too terrifying to face, I'm begging you, listen to that feeling. Don't be the hero in someone else's lie. The cost is too high. Your own life, your own truth, is the only thing worth protecting. Be your own shield. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share this video. You never know who might need to hear it. Stay safe, and trust your gut. It's usually right.